Hello and welcome to another episode of The Coder Career. My name is Cameron Blackwood and today I am joined by Josh Brearley. This is a very special episode because I thought I was one of a kind. I thought I was the only former tech recruiter to become a software engineer, but not so. Josh has also done the same journey. Josh has spent the majority of his career in the northwest of England working as both a tech recruiter and now a software engineer specialising in the front end. Josh joins today to discuss his experience of leaving technical recruitment, the value he's gathered from it, and why he chose to take on a career in software engineering. Whether you're a recruiter looking to get out of that world yourself, or if you're a software engineer looking to break into the industry, this could be the episode for you. Before we get started, please do check out my YouTube channel. I'm trying to upload on there more recently. And also as well, do check out our Discord server. There's a friendly bunch in there. Enjoy the show. Hey Josh, thanks so much for joining me. How you doing?
Not so bad, mate. Not so bad. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I mean, I was very excited when I realised your backstory. Obviously, you're someone that chats on our Discord community quite a bit, so I already knew who you were. And then we got in a conversation, and I was like, "Hold on a minute, you used to be a recruiter as well," and I hadn't picked up on that at all. So as soon as you mentioned that, I thought we need to actually have a conversation because there's a very very small community of us people that worked in tech recruitment and then moved on for whatever reason to actually become the developers ourselves. So, yeah, for people who aren't familiar with you, either from the Discord or LinkedIn or somewhere like that, do you want to explain? I guess I've given people the headline, but do you want to say a bit about who you are and what led you to this point?
Yeah, so my name's Josh. I initially went to university and did business management, so it was completely away from tech. Kind of a bit of a difference from when I was a kid. I used to be tinkering around with a lot of tech, just kind of more private server based stuff. So like RuneScape private servers and things like that, making forums and things. Nothing too code intensive. It was just like maybe editing like strings here and there to change certain things or Boolean values and things like that. So then when I went to university, I kind of was like, well, I don't really know what I want to do. So I kind of took a course that was like, right, I'll keep as many doors open as I could. So I took business management in Manchester, and I enjoyed it. And so when I came out, I was like, right, okay, what do I want to do? And then I came across a role from a company called Maxwell Bond in Manchester, and it was like something to do with tech recruitment and sales and things like that. And I thought, well, why not try and get involved in that? So I went and spoke to their owner, so Stephen Jagger, and it was a decent chat at the interview, to be fair. And I thought it would be something that I would enjoy getting into. And to be fair, I did for the first, let's say, 4 or 5 months. It was you learning loads of new skills when you come out of university. So much stuff that I hadn't learned about business because it was generally quite a small startup when I joined. So you got to see behind the curtain and learn quite a lot of things that you wouldn't otherwise have been exposed to if you was to join a large company. So yeah, it was good. And then probably around the 5 or 6 month mark, I probably started to realize like the pressure of recruitment, as you know yourself, it gets quite intense, and kind of expectations on you not wanting to let people down, and then trying to double question yourself if your pipeline goes dry or someone doesn't turn up to an interview. And there's so many loopholes that can kind of bite you, kind of thing. The things that you can
Living
do
with
wrong
so
as
much
well.
stuff that's
So
out of your control is just so hard. I think that's why I couldn't deal with it. Just literally having so many factors outside of your own control. Because at least in sales, like the product you're selling doesn't have a mind of its own.
yeah, exactly. And there'd be times where you'd kind of be expecting someone to get a job, or you're like, right, they're perfect for the role, and for one reason or other, they wouldn't turn up. They get a counter offer, the offer wouldn't be enough, or you couldn't pair them with somewhere that was looking for them in time before they got snapped up. So it was very fast paced, very kind of high pressure. And I think for someone with a personality like myself, it probably wasn't the best fit, but I didn't really know at the time. I was just like, right, I'm going to try and make this work no matter what. Um, but it was also quite a hard journey as well. I was doing like an hour in travel in the morning, get to the office for like 8 a.m. and then like in the evenings, it was getting to a point where I was like, is it worth the money kind of thing, or am I happy in this role? So Jagger actually sat me down. Stephen Jagger sat me down and was just like, are you is this what you want? And like I hadn't really asked myself that question because I was kind of so caught up in try where's the next deal coming from, what's the pipeline looking like how am I going to try and keep the job kind of thing. Because there wasn't ever pressure to like say, oh, you're going to lose the job, but you put that on yourself essentially, don't you? Like, if you're not performing, there's going to be questions asked of you and things like that. So yeah, we had that meeting, and I'd already had a pint about maybe 3 days prior with one of my best mates, and he was like, "I'm thinking about going into coding," and I was kind of like, could I do that? Could I not do that? And then I kind of thought, well, it was a moment where I was like, when we were in that meeting, going back to Maxwell Bond, I was like, when you just pull the trigger on an idea in your head and you're like, right, I'm going for it. So I left that day, and got back home, and in fairness, it was like a huge weight had been lifted. Like the responsibility of trying to like do it all kind of got lifted, and then it was like, right, okay, this is the next mountain that I want to climb. I didn't even know what like a variable was or anything. I'd never really looked into it. I just thought, right, okay, boot camps exist, and I was very lucky that Stephen put me in touch with a guy from the boot camp that I went to, which is Code Nation. So there was a dialogue between us, and then a decision was made that I would start. But it was during COVID, so it was quite volatile. I'd maybe done 2 or 3 weeks, and then it was like, all right, lockdown. So it all became online. So I was like, right, I'm struggling to understand this code stuff because it was so overwhelming at the start. Not just like you're kind of dealing with the emotions of not knowing what COVID was at the time as well. So I was like, you go through a massive kind of realization, like, can I do this? Like, is it possible? And then like imposter syndrome kicks in, and there's that kind of element to it. But I just carried on. I got a few part-time jobs to tide me over. Worked for the NHS at the time. Did a bit of caring, like end-of-life caring, to kind of just get the bills paid, essentially, like pay my car and whatnot. And just carried on that way, really, and just kept the belief that eventually I will get it. Like, it was just kind of, I had no other option, and I think that was probably one of the best things for me at the time. It was like, right, I don't have like if I didn't have the feeling like, right, okay, if I can't do this, what can I do? It was right, this is what I'm gonna do eventually. It doesn't matter how long it's gonna take. I'm gonna try. But how was your journey from? Was yours similar or different or?
Similar-ish. It sounds like you had a much more of a peaceful exit from the recruitment world than me. So, funnily enough, our story is literally weirdly the same, to the point of I did business management as well at uni. Didn't go to the same uni, but I studied business management again. Thought it would be a good way of knowing that I would have multiple doors open, and then I went into recruitment, and I was so annoyed by how like the whole I worked for quite in the euphemism would be a old school agency, and the culture annoyed me so much, and the way people behaved so annoyed me so much that I actually joined a startup on the sales side that was trying to basically take the traditional recruitment model out of existence. And basically be the smart recruitment agency of the future. So I've still, I still talk to them all the time. Talent IO, the company that I joined, and whilst working there, because they were a software as a service company essentially. So they had a dev team, and I got to know the dev team well. I was pretty inspired by what they were working on, and it became one of those things where they were very flexible in general, and it was pretty much an open secret after a while that I wanted to be a dev at that company, and they were really really supportive, and like I was able to learn fairly easily during my lunch breaks and stuff, and they didn't mind me using my computer for coding and everything like that. So for me, I realized that I had to dedicate some more time to it. So similar to you, I quit, and then I went and took on contract jobs, just internal recruitment jobs, basically on a day rate. And then I have a weird story where I basically negotiated a day rate contract where for 4 days a week I would be recruiting, 1 day a week coding. So that was how I got my first kind of step into the industry. And yeah, that's been the same way ever since. I mean, I actually think I can't think of the right word for it, but I dithered almost a bit too long, where I was quite good at coding, but I needed that extra push. And I didn't really, I kind of I was in the doldrums, I guess is the right word, where I knew probably 80% of what was required to get a job. I probably knew that for about 6 months and didn't really progress much. So I think all in all, yeah, it took me like 2 years, I reckon, to break into tech in the end.
See, my similar is almost identical to that. So like my situation, it was like it got to around this time last year, actually, so December last year, and you can't really quantify how much you know. You don't really know, do you? So you're like, am I ready? Am I not ready? I think if I had to, when I was having an honest chat with myself, I was like, I probably aren't ready um, to make a start as of yet. Just like basic JavaScript knowledge and stuff like that, it wasn't up to what I would deem job ready. Um, in comparison to what I'd seen, like juniors trying to break into the market when we were in recruitment and stuff like that. So I wasn't actively looking. I always thought, right, okay, it'd be good to lean on my LinkedIn, carry on connecting with people, building it up from there. And I'd done a few like articles and a podcast or something like that while I was there to try and like grow that out to a certain extent. And then I got a message around, must have been start of December, late November, maybe last year, from Bloom, who is they're basically a very small startup that do like health tech. And they were like, "We'd like to interview you. You seem like you've got the skill set." And at the time, at first, I genuinely just thought it was a scam. I was like, "This is like me, why?" Like kind of thing. But as you do, you just kind of like, yeah. I had a chat with one of the guys a little bit more, and then they brought me in for like I say brought me in, it was completely remote. So it was like I had an interview. So it was just like a one to two kind of Zoom call. And they were going through like what their expectations were and stuff and like what I'd done in the past. And they kind of wanted a little bit of advice on like their recruitment tactics and what they were doing and how they were strategically trying to bring people in. And they thought I could help with that. So then it was kind of agreed that I would help them with that as well as doing dev work. So like when we agreed on that, I was like, right, okay, I'll go in there. But then like in the first month, I kind of felt like I was almost like an internal dev because they were coming to me with a lot, internal recruiter, should I say.
Mm.
They were coming to me with a lot of recruitment questions, and one of my friends he was taking the mick out of me. He was like, "You've just moved from recruitment into internal recruitment," and it was like it was a joke from what he was saying, but it was like it was grinding on me because I was like, "Oh, this isn't what I want." Like going back through your LinkedIn recruiter, they put me on a seat in there and stuff, and
Oh,
like,
really? All that far?
yeah,
Because I've been asked a
yeah,
lot
like
for advice, but yeah, they've never
yeah,
gone
yeah,
as far as
yeah,
giving me
yeah.
a LinkedIn recruiter account.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I didn't mind because I'd gone from earning maybe 450 less, maybe even less a month, like working as a carer because it was so little money, and
Mm.
to like a, a decent. I wouldn't say it was okay, like you could get by on it. I was like, right, okay, it's not high pressure. They're not coming to me and saying, "What have you found? What have you found? What have you found?" But it was kind of like, am I stunting my growth here by accepting this and not trying to apply elsewhere? So about a month in, we sorted out their strategy for how they were going to try and bring people in. I had a few meetings with them. We tried to bring recruitment partnerships on that unfortunately fell through because I don't know if they had the funds or kind of if that's the way that they wanted to move towards because I think they were like they weren't cash rich at the time. So it was just trying to work out what the best scenario was for them. And then it come to a point where I was about 2 months in, and I was like, look, this like this really needs for me to be happy. I need to be focusing on the dev work, and that was what it was because it was only 1 day a week, but it was like it kind of pulled me away mentally of like right, okay, I'm a dev. Do you know what I mean? You kind of need that like
Mm.
assurance, like when you're working on stuff and you're trying to learn stuff. But luckily for me, I had a guy called Micah and he was a CTO at the time. He's since left, but he was there for my duration, and he was fantastic as a mentor. And we went through a lot in terms of this is how we do things, this is how I do things, and he was very humble in the sense that he was open to someone being quite junior, and he was used to training juniors where he'd been at Hillary's Blinds in the past, where he kind of brought up a full team there. So I was really lucky in that sense. And then we had a guy come in who I called the Mbappe of tech. I still do to this day. He's I think he's 19 now. He would have been 18 at the time, and I've never seen anything like it for his age. Ridiculous. He was Leo's such a brilliant guy. I'll put him in touch. Hopefully he'll come on
Yeah,
here.
sounds a good podcast
You'd love
guest.
to have a chat with him. You would love to pick his brain on tech. He's like an encyclopedia. So he come in and so we got to do a lot of pair programming. I learned a hell of a lot from him, and it just went from there. Really, we developed a couple of apps that they had that was it was quite wholesome stuff. To be fair, what you were doing, you were creating stuff for like doctors and labs and um, generally things that were going to help people in the NHS. So it was nice. It was a good stepping stone into React, doing what I wanted to do. And towards the back end of it, it just felt like I probably hit the ceiling in where I could grow in that company because of the size of it. I was looking for something a little bit, like small to medium size. Like we're moving to Mission Labs. I had a chat with them probably about July, and having a chat with them and realizing what they've got there compared to. And I just had an open chat with Bloom and said, look, this is the direction I want to go in. I want the exposure to more tech, kind of a bigger team, a little bit more pressure, because there'd be times where Bloom where you'd have quite a bit of downtime while the tickets were being redone or the work wasn't coming in or we'd finished the work. And it was, I suppose I'd realised that the growth in there was probably slowing down a little bit more, so I was wanting to try and push myself a bit further. And Mission Labs were great. The induction's been great. I've been there for I think 2 months now, and I don't have one bad word to say about it. To be fair, apart from the drive, maybe in the morning on a Thursday, it's like an hour drive. But apart from that, that's only one day a week. Apart from that, it's been brilliant.
Yeah, I'm glad I work remote personally because most of the other devs I know here that I mean, to be fair, I'm walkable from centre of Edinburgh, but I know a lot of devs that drive over to Glasgow and like it's one of those ones where it's normally all right, but it's one of those motorways that like when it's bad, it is like you're not getting home till 11 p.m. Like that's how bad it
Yeah,
gets, one of those ones.
we're quite lucky in the sense at Mission Labs where you've got flexi time. So if I was in the office, I'd probably get there for 9, and then I'd probably leave at 4, maybe do an hour and a half in the evening once I've got back. Because if I
Mm,
set off at 4, I can get back in an hour. Just set off at 5, you're going to stand still in traffic for 20, 30 minutes just getting out of the centre of
yeah.
Manchester. So it's they're quite flexible, and they've been really good in pairing me up with a guy that's had a similar route into tech than myself. He's been there for like 14, 18 months. He's brilliant in what he's been teaching, and you can kind of see the progression that he will have gone through, going from his boot camp into Mission Labs, and where he's at now is a very, I would say, a strong point to be able to teach as well, in terms of what he teaches me on the repos, some of the stuff that I might not have been using in regards to like best practice in code and stuff. So no, it has been good. I've not felt in the dark whatsoever, and the tickets have been relatively fluid as well, because we're just coming towards the end of a build at the moment, and I think they've pretty much got everything done. So it's just like bug tickets, accessibility stuff that I've been working on at the minute, and just basic React stuff. So it's been really good, to be fair. Very happy in hindsight that I did make that kind of link, because I didn't want to send out a load of CVs, go and do a load of tech tests and stuff like that, and fill my evenings
Mm.
getting stressed to try and move roles. But their interview process was fantastic. Like you did I say in interview tech test. I don't even know if that's a thing, but it was like
Yeah, like a
40.
live coding. Yeah, that's my favorite way
Yeah,
of doing it as
exactly.
well.
Yeah,
Much prefer
and
that.
it wasn't like trick questions or anything either. It was very simple React and TypeScript. Like we've created this mini application. I don't know if I remember what it was. It's like a note taking app, I think. Like your generalized thing that you learn when you start with React, like
Yeah, like
whatever,
the
to
to-do
put stuff in
list or
state.
yeah.
Yeah, putting stuff in state and just like typing things and with TypeScript, and like I didn't ace it. I'll be honest. Like I left that interview thinking, right, well, I didn't expect TypeScript to come up, and I was only relatively new to it as well. So I was like, kind of winged it. Um, Luckily, got a lot of the TypeScript stuff right, and then was kind of struggling a little bit with the basic fundamental React knowledge, but enough to a point where it was like, right, okay, I've done this, I've tried this, I've tried this, I've tried this, and then eventually it worked. But I've probably got like three out of the 5 things, the bugs that they had in. So I wasn't expecting to get an offer whatsoever. And then they gave me a call about 2 weeks later saying we'd like to we'd like to take you on. And I was just like, I just wasn't expecting it. Do you know what I mean? It was one of them where it's like,
Yeah.
I went into the interview quite confident and wasn't really nervous because I was like, I'm seeing this interview more so as like a learning process because I didn't expect to actually come through with anything from it other than just the experience of what is a larger company like in an interview process. Because you will have done it yourself. You put people through so many interviews and you get an idea for what they look like, and they're all slightly different in their own way. Um, but it was good. They've got a good internal recruitment team that were very direct with the conversations and kind of what they expected from me, and things kind of just slotted together. To be fair,
Mm. See, I bet what it is where you say you didn't answer everything perfectly. I reckon the reasoning is that they're looking to see how you think, and I think that's something really important that a lot of people listening who are trying to get their first job or even second job should keep in mind. Like, they're not expecting you to ace it. Like, that's not the purpose of a tech test at all. Because most people, most humans are not gonna ace a tech test immediately, especially when it's live. 'Cause you're gonna be nervous. There's gonna be other factors. So what they want to do is they want to see your problem solving process, and one of the biggest things is talking through what you're working on. I mean, for me, if I was in charge of all the world's technical recruitment process, I would suggest a 45-minute pairing technical task. But when I say pairing, I don't mean someone just watching you. I mean someone actively coding along with you, and you each talk about how you're approaching the problem. And the best way to do that is to get someone in who you realistically would be pairing with, someone who's probably like one rank above you rather than like five. And is what I really liked about what you said about being able to see someone who's on your track but a little bit further ahead in their career. That's exactly where you want to be, because you can see what everything's going to be like, and it's a green flag. There's all this. Ever since I started posting on TikTok, like nearly 2 years ago now, everyone seems to frame everything in red flags and green flags. And a major green flag for a tech job is if you can see the exact kind of vertical path you could take, and be able to speak with those people in the interview process.
it's got to feel attainable. I guess is kind of like that's one of the things for me was self belief. I saw my friend do it, who was maybe a few months ahead of me, and it was like, can you do? What are the chances of doing this through a boot camp? How like what are the probability that I will succeed? Or like you kind of, I had to see. For me, it helped seeing other people doing it and being like, right, okay, they've done it, so there is a way to do it. And then I was obviously very grateful to have that recruitment knowledge of like, you've just got to be relentless. Like I'm lucky I never had to be, but I was prepared to be like, right, okay, eventually I'll probably have to send out CVs everywhere, just try and speak to different people. It might not be, they might, because junior jobs for me, I'd never had to place one when I was in recruitment, so I didn't know. But you did get an influx of junior CVs. If you remember, you put out a job ad, you'd have to sift through like the juniors trying to get towards that ad, and stuff like that. So I thought it would just be another number in a system, to be fair. So I thought it'd be very hard, but I was. I don't like calling it luck, but it was it is luck. Do you know what I
There's
mean? Like
always a
someone comes
factor of
across
it,
the
but you
profile.
make your own luck.
Yeah, and 100% you can, but I think sometimes you have to concede that like it was luck because the message that I got was like 1 or 2 in the morning, I think, from
Yeah,
the one of the guys. So I was just like, "There's no way this is realistic." So at first, I'd opened it and then not read it, and then it was just like when on the second scrolling through, I was like, "I'll just read it." So I read it, and I thought it'd be a copy and paste, and it wasn't. So it was just like being aware that sometimes a little bit of luck does come in, but again, like you say, you can create your own luck, and as long as you're competent with tech, it doesn't matter about age or anything like that. If you're competent and you have a skill set that somebody needs because it's a candidate short market, you will
yeah,
get the opportunity. Somebody will give you a chance to prove yourself, and like you say, you don't need to ace the tech test, don't need to be the best person as long as you. I think so. The main pillars in tech is being able to conversate properly, like you say, talk to yourself almost out loud during or to the other person you're paired with about your process in which you're going through the test, or how you how you understand tech, or you might only have a generalistic view, but as long as you're showing like you have an interest in it as well, an interest to learn more about it, because I think a lot of the time they're seeing, right, okay, you might not know TypeScript, you might not know much about JavaScript, but like what can we build him into over a period of 6 to 12 months, and then the retention would be higher if they can offer you a good trajectory and things like that. So it works out for both ways. You're benefiting because the company's providing for you, and they're benefiting because you're going to stay for longer and provide value for them as well. So it's a two-way street, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And an analogy I like to use around the making luck and getting yourself in the position to get that first job is, I like to think of it like how the best strikers in world football, they're not necessarily the best finishers. Obviously, they're great. They're great at shooting a football, right? But what they are actually the best at is getting in the exact right position to score. So chances are they're getting in that position much more than someone who plays for, I don't know, Cheltenham Town. No offense to any strikers of Cheltenham Town who may be listening, but like Mbappe is going to get in better positions. So it's one of those things that's worth thinking about. And apologies for the 20% American listeners. I'd like to think of an American football analogy, but I can't. So yeah, I think it's one of those things worth thinking about, how you got to get yourself in the right position. And something I was quite keen to ask you, and I actually forgot to put it in the show notes, so apologies. Both of us are former recruiters, and I'm sure we always think about the advantages that brings us. But what's something you think that we potentially take for granted that we know about as former recruiters, that the average dev who's trying to break into the industry or get a new job, what do they not know about that we know about and just take for granted?
It's a good question. I think again, going back to your positioning, it's I like to think of it as getting your shop window intact. Like there's many pillars to, okay, let's have him in for an interview. That's the kind of, you need to create the key to get that. So I think it's looking at the little things. So as little as you can go on mail.com and get like, let's say Josh Brearley at engineer.com. I've got
I
a
see. I
number
really
one.
like that. When we
There's
set up the
little
podcast,
things.
was it? Do you know what? Because I brought that up to you. I remember bringing that up to you, thinking, "How do you manage that?" It's exactly, you're right. A little thing to just grab the eye.
Yeah, it's a tiny thing like that. And like having a portfolio website, like my portfolio website was in hindsight really bad, but it did the job at the time. Like in comparison to what I could do now, but like at the time it was fit for purpose. And all that was a Udemy course that I'd learned that helped me build with React, helped me learn a bit more CSS at the time. I got to use stuff like Frame Emotion that I'd thought of myself, and then implemented it through that, different npm packages, and just kind of like it was really a lot of it was just a copy job and then edit. Do you know what I mean? And learn that way. And it was like do that, build up some GitHub stuff, and get that on there as well. Make sure. And it sounds bad, but a lot of it is perceived value, whichever way you want to look at it. Like if I picked up a CV, a website, or someone's GitHub when I was in recruitment, and they had, we used to call it a lightsaber of green commits on GitHub. Like you would be more inclined to be like, okay, this person knows what they're doing, even though as a recruiter you had no idea whether
Yeah,
someone was good at
you didn't
coding
know
or
it was just
not.
someone opening up issues, because you get one if you just
Yeah,
open up an issue. Like,
yeah, literally, and it's like the smallest commits, and um, so I was probably like some of my focus was on I would start to get a bit nervous, like, oh, I haven't coded in the past 4 weeks. The employer's going to know that I haven't had a green dot, and therefore they'll know I'm doing nothing. And like I started to get too much into it that way. But I do think that kind of thing helps as well, even if I don't like to admit that. I think it getting at least a little bit on there to show that you do it and you are doing it outside of your normal job, or even that's for someone wanting to make a step up, or even if you've never done it before, even more so because you've got to have evidence of what you've done. And a lot of the projects that I was doing were via Udemy or YouTube videos for free, and just kind of like implementing them and just toying around with it and seeing if I could actually break it and implement maybe newer tech. Because as you know, if you follow a YouTube video and it might be like even 6 months is a long time in tech, and
yeah,
something's updated, and you don't at the start you don't really understand that you need to update dependencies or something like that, and like it
yeah.
probably trips you up because you're like, oh, it doesn't work. Like, why is everyone saying in the comments that it works? Like,
See,
but
I learned React when it was in the right in the middle of moving over to functional components, and that was such a pain because every time you open up a YouTube video, you had no idea if it was going to be class or functional. And I know both, but I mean, if you ask me to write a class component now, absolutely not. Like, there's
Oh,
no
I'm
way.
the same,
Like,
mate.
I know, not off the top of my head, anyway.
I'm exactly the same. I was very lucky that when I broke into tech at the start of this year, pretty much everyone had switched over to hooks and functional components and functional programming and whatever. And it was just like, right, I had they were talking about, we were talking actually with the CTO, Micah, and he was saying, oh, some of it's class based, but he didn't mean class-based React components. He was talking about like, we use classes, blah, blah, blah. And I took it as it's class-based, and I took all of my boot camp, all of my Udemy courses, everything on functional. So I was like, oh, the job's probably not for me then, because I'd be so far behind in terms of learning it. I thought it was a huge thing to have to go back, and then I was thinking, do I want to go back and learn a legacy version? Like, but in the end, it was just miscommunication, and it was all functional programming, and on the functional React components on the inside. So I was just like, right, a lot of it is just not thinking too much into it. Because if you look at a spec for a job, some of them that you get sent now, it's like you're not looking for a dev, you're looking for a dev team, and
Oh
it would
yeah,
really put
absolutely.
you off. It would really put you off in applying for certain things, and it's like they're probably internal recruiters or people that haven't had the proper technical chat or technical information at their disposal, and then writing a load of things that they want, collating it into a big long list. And it's like, right, we need this. And they put a huge fishing net out, and hopefully they'll catch a few and interview a few, and someone might stick. But the, I, I would generally, as long as you find the niche, what I find is I've tutored a couple of people now. I say tutored, it's more mentor, to be fair. You know, like when people say, oh, how did you do it?
Yeah.
What would you advise, like uni graduates and stuff? And I'd say, like, pick your niche. Like, for me, I only picked React because that was the market that I was doing in recruitment, and I knew it was quite good, and I knew the community was quite good in the sense that it was large, and opposed to like Angular and Vue, which are slightly smaller, but in my own perspective back then had a slightly smaller learning curve. So React I thought was quite a tough learning curve at the start, but the community would have been really good to get involved with, and the jobs seemed to be um, popping up here and there, and I just thought, let's go for that. So that was the niche that I chose. So I chose that, and then just the basics around it that you would usually get, like basic knowledge of JavaScript. To try to pick up TypeScript, stuff like Material UI for CSS and them kind of frameworks, and just try and mold myself into someone that can perceivably provide value, because I didn't think that I did at the time. I had mass amounts of imposter syndrome, thinking
Yeah.
someone's not going to employ me. But that's one thing that I would give anyone listening advice on, is pick your niche, because at the start you really want to nail down one tech and provide value there, or a small subset of tech that complement one another, like a MERN stack or something like that. I think is beneficial, rather than saying, right, I've got a CV and you've got a million things that you've done. You might have done like a course on Solidity and maybe some Java, and then you're applying for a front end role, and then you're applying for a back end role, all with the same CV. And it doesn't always work. You'll obviously get edge cases where it will, but I think it's massively more beneficial to say, I'm Josh, I do this, and then eventually, if you want to branch out into other tech in your spare time, or your company uses more, you will get exposed to that over time anyway. You'll get the opportunity to either go full stack or in different directions. But I think getting your first job, again, like you say, is probably the hardest, and to try and really niche yourself off, attain that first job, and then branch from there really, and use it as a base point.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the job market will get more and more niche and specialist, especially with generic tools like chat with GPT-3 and stuff. If that starts getting used more, then what's going to pay off is being good at your niche. And I think I'd recommend, like, I'm at the kind of point where I'm like, I probably just passed the 3 year mark of my career now, and in technology, and it's only now really that I'm actually looking at branching out and broadening my skill set a bit more, and becoming a proper, like, I'm technically a fully fledged full stack developer, according to my contract, but I'm not really in practice. So now is the time where I'm looking at stuff like Python, Docker in much more depth,
Yeah.
So, but I've really like nailed down React and made React my kind of bread and butter for the time. And that's basically all I've been working on. Since I even really tried to break into the industry. Like I paid money to go on a React course before I even got a job in tech. Like I realized that the market was there, and I think maybe answering my own question from earlier about what do we know that other people don't and may not even realize it. It's just the fact that like actually you should really strongly consider targeting your learning around the job market and what's available out there at a junior level. Because if you were to go by the Stack Overflow survey, the most loved language is Rust, and like that's what people talk about all the time. Rust, Rust, Rust. When the crypto market wasn't a complete shambles, everyone was talking about Solidity more, and people still talk about it a lot. But again, how many actual junior opportunities are there out there to use Rust or Solidity versus
Yeah,
using
especially in
something like
Solidity.
JavaScript?
Yeah,
Yeah, because
I
like the
think.
niche is like something like Calyptus, Dan and Callum who run Calyptus, who are on here, probably would have been 3 months ago now, and their whole business model is that they teach experienced engineers to use stuff like Solidity because that is the best way to approach something like that. You should follow the money both at the start and after your career, not in terms of like accumulating as much wealth as possible, just looking at where the jobs are, right?
Yeah, and I think if you taking Solidity for an example, I think it's probably good to have a fundamental knowledge of programming prior to going into a language like that. That's probably less forgiving than something like React or JavaScript when you're first learning, or even Python, which is probably I've only done a little bit, but from my understanding, is probably quite nicer for juniors. I know it gets
It's
taught
it's
on the
nice, but what I would say is if you're used to braces, it can
yeah.
be horrendous. Like I get annoyed with it frequently because of that. Like you have
I
to
was
have the
listening.
indentation exactly right.
Yeah, funny enough you say that. I was watching Lex Friedman interviewing the fella that created Python. Or
Oh,
just they were
Dutch
talking
guy
about the
Guido
indentation.
van something.
Yeah. And they were talking about the case for braces versus indentation and things like that. So I think having other tech on the radar and following it and is not always a bad thing, especially as you get towards like your mid point in your career, or when you get midweight after a couple of years, 3 years, whatever. I think it's good to always keep an eye on the market because React won't be around for forever, and like there will be a new craze of like, okay, the community moves on to something that's shinier eventually. Um, so just like keeping up to date with it, and when it becomes big enough, like for example, Next, like I wouldn't mind learning Next just because it's basically, to my understanding, it is just like repackaged React with a nice
Yeah, it's
shiny label and like
React plus plus. It's React with some
yeah,
useful stuff, and you get a back end included. It's really good. I'd recommend it.
and good for like SEO and things like that in comparison to what you get out the box with React. So just like even the little things like I wouldn't mind the new portfolio to be able to put stuff on. So I'm going to create that in Next just to see what the benefits and drawbacks of it are and if I like it. And obviously not necessarily make the full switch because my job's still primarily React, TypeScript, and all that kind of thing. But it's just keeping an eye on, like you say, where the money is and kind of really honing in on some other edge case skills because I feel like if you do the same thing over and over, no matter how much you like it, eventually you will get bored of it and it'll get
Mm.
to a point where you're like, that's why
Especially if you're
I
not
would
being
say,
challenged.
yeah, exactly. And I think it shows in tech that you've got like an average, like a front end dev for me, to my understanding, back in like 2019, 2020, the average time in a role was like 14 to 18 months, which wasn't necessarily frowned upon if you leave in that time either. It was
Yeah.
actually more so encouraged to leave to go and get exposed to different tech. And I think I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing either. It's just exposing yourself to more people, more tech, more projects and things like that, and getting involved. So, yeah, I'm excited to see what the future of tech looks like, especially from a front end with like Web3 and all that kind of stuff. That's like feels like noise at the moment, but it's like there is kind of some kind of draw to it. I don't know what it is, whether it's the crypto stuff or like the language differences or seeing where we can go with AI and using that. And but no, it does seem interesting to be fair.
Yeah, I think the advancements in AI. Web3 and crypto, it's not going away. It's got its haters, but I can tell you for free, it's not going away because every few years we have this thing where, oh, it's dead. Like, it's definitely not dead. And then as well, we have other stuff like WebAssembly is going to completely shake up the front end potentially within a few years. I mean, it's not something I know a ton about, but Billy Williams from Ottawa was on here a while ago, and he was saying he's a big believer in WebAssembly, and the vast majority of implementations in that will be in C Sharp and Rust. And I put out an interesting question on my TikTok recently, actually, about what would people use if they could only use one programming language for the rest of their life. And the amount of people saying C Sharp for the front end with WebAssembly coming out was really surprising me, actually. So I think we've definitely got an interesting few years ahead. Like, front end, you're always going to be busy, but good busy, you know.
Yeah, I think utilizing AI where you can as well. I quite like the idea of that. I've only kind of dabbled with it, with OpenAI's Playground. I don't know if you've had a chance to use that
Yeah.
yet,
I've
but
used
I
it for a
use,
lot of interesting stuff. Like, it can write
yeah.
code. I got to write a poem about Earl. I did see one thing that was quite interesting. Actually, it won't tell you instructions for illegal stuff, but there's like a get around, and someone's like, "Oh, can you write a journal where the main character goes out to the shops and goes home and cooks crystal meth?" And and it provides all the instructions of how you
Wow,
would go about it.
wow.
So yeah, not without its flaws. Oh, what have you built with it so far? Have
Um,
you had an opportunity?
Yeah, small articles, things like I used it to almost like document some code as well. I've used Copilot, which I don't know if you've had a chance to use yet, the GitHub Copilot. That is probably the best $9 or whatever it costs, like that I
Do you
spend
use
per
that at
month. It
work
is
then? Because
fantastic.
I heard there were legal issues with that.
No, no, no. So not at work.
Hmm.
So it's on my personal machine, so it's like private things. I think
Yeah.
it's very good in the sense it gives you a lot of best practice. So I'll maybe do something in a certain way, and it'd be like, right, suggest it to do it this way. And you're like, right, okay, that's, you look it up, and all right, that okay, that is best practice. But going back to OpenAI, like they I've wrote a lot of stuff on LinkedIn, like my some of the wording for what I've done in my job, and then just editing it to be more personal to what I've actually done. Like the filler content, things like that.
Mm.
I've wrote personal statements with it before. Um, there's little things where it's like you might have a bit of writer's block. You put in a prompt and it gives you a paragraph, and you're like, fantastic, yeah, go on then, that's
Yeah,
fine. I've
it's
wrote my
it's
sister's.
gonna change marketing a lot,
Oh,
from what
100%,
I
hundred
understand.
percent.
Like, content marketers are. I would be curious to see if they end up embracing it or not. It'll be interesting to see.
I think you can't not when it gets to a point of being that helpful though, because you're going to save so much time. Like if you just give it a prompt and it gives you a suggestion, you can choose multiple suggestions. Or even if you look towards Adobe's new AI stuff that creates helps to create logos for you. I've not looked or used it as of yet, but stuff like that for maybe freelance projects and building that because it creates an element where a dev that maybe not as creative as someone in UI UX can have the opportunity to get that kind of ability and implement it into dev. And then you've kind of got the full package if you full stack, because then you can do the front end, back end, and the design work. And it gets to a
Mm.
point where you can't ignore
You're like a
these
web
things.
development agency in one
Yeah,
person.
exactly, and I think that's the way that it is moving, and you kind of have to listen to some of these kind of because you get a lot of people, small communities that make a lot of noise about something that may just die out slowly, but stuff like OpenAI and the Adobe thing and GitHub Copilot, they've all that kind of stuff. I can't speak highly enough of. Like that's helped me so much with writing stuff, with coding in my own time, things like that. So yeah,
I might have to give Copilot a try then. You're selling it to me very well. I think for £9, it's got to be worth a
I think it's
shot
something like that.
on
It's
my
like I
personal
don't notice
projects.
it's gone, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's it's something I picked up about must have been about 4 months ago on my personal machine, and I was just like, "It's fantastic. This you need to look at it." Put it that
Yeah.
way.
There's a lot of we talked quite a lot on this show recently about indie hacking and like clever little ways to make money with coding, and the amount of stuff you can do with AI now to just leverage it, almost arbitrage it. Like I don't know if you follow Peter Levels, but he's an amazing follow on Twitter, and he basically built a really simple app that would use OpenAI's or Stable Diffusion, I can't remember which one, the image generator basically for people's
Right. Okay.
headshots. It's like a Fiverr, and this guy, he openly posts pictures where he's basically just coding in his pants on a sofa in Bali, and he's pulling in seven figures just from basically making these apps that just basically call these endpoints in these publicly available APIs. That you, obviously like he has to pay for the number of calls or whatever. But the way it's structured, it's costed per call. So he's already knows he's making X amount of profit on each API call. So it's pretty incredible what you can do with these tools. Because I think what's important to understand, and what I've talked about quite a bit recently on the Discord, is that the average person on the street really doesn't actually understand that much about how the internet works. So AI is a real opportunity for us devs to make a bit of cold hard cash and and see what kind of tools we can make by leveraging it.
Yeah. Uh, is Python involved with a lot of AI now? Am I right in
Yeah,
thinking?
so from what I understand, Python is generally the de facto language for machine learning, and I think in terms of academics, which is obviously heavily intertwined with machine learning, I think Python is basically the standard. I can't speak for absolutely everyone, and I would be keen to get an AI specialist on the show actually. So if anyone is listening and is a machine learning engineer, then drop me a line. But yeah, I think Python is the de facto. I think if you go if it's further
Possibilities
down,
are
then it might
endless,
be
aren't they?
something more like C++.
Yeah, I think stuff like, for example, with Tesla, you see how much data they get, and they're only getting better at self-automated driving and what AI can do for that, and the safety implications that it may have for us, and not just in auto travel. Like you'll have maybe AI trains, AI planes. We already have like pilots that basically just land and take off, don't we nowadays? And the rest is
Yeah,
done for them. But I think, especially in cars and stuff, I watched. I don't know if you watch any Marquez Brownlee on YouTube.
I do.
Uh,
Yeah, I like him. His videos are really
yeah,
good.
he showed a video recently. It's like 2 to 3 days ago of the beta for self-driving car for the Tesla, and it was like the beta that he's got on the. I don't think it's publicly open. I'm not entirely sure, but it kind of shows it. The stage we're at the moment is like he's babysitting the car, and he kind of drives like an old person. It's really a bit kind of. It's good on highways and things, but as soon as you get into like having to turn left, turn right, busy kind of interchanges and stuff, it does look like you probably would prefer to drive yourself. But when it comes to like staying in lane on the motorways and things like that, it's already fantastic. So their computer is, well, then whatever you call it, the net of information they have is only just getting better and better and better as more miles get clocked on the car. And I think that's another example of how AI can be used in a positive way. But then there's the argument of the other way where it can be used in warfare and all that kind of thing, and it can be really detrimental, and we kind of have to regulate it and things like that. So
Yeah.
you have to kind of look at the whole picture when it comes to it, really.
And in general as well, like AI is ultimately only as good as the information you actually feed into it. So, if you feed it biased information, then you can have quite a lot of problems. Like it can end up being, particularly if it's dealing with people, that's when it can end up with serious issues, and it can end up being discriminatory and that sort of thing. So, yeah, have to be so careful. The Coder Career podcast is brought to you by the Zero to Mastery Academy. I don't take just any sponsorship. For me, it was important to know that people would get value out of a course. The reason why I've agreed to work with Zero to Mastery is because I actually use their React courses myself to get my first job in technology. They provide courses on a number of different disciplines, and their founder, Andre, is someone who I highly respect. Check out the link in the description and use code FRIENDS10 to get 10% off any plan. Thanks for supporting the Coder Career. Now back to the show. But yeah, that's taken us up to the hour mark now, actually, Josh. So I think that's all we got time for today. But I think there's 100% a part two available here if you'd be interested in coming back on. But thanks so much for joining. It was a really interesting chat.
And you, mate, thanks for having me on. I appreciate that, and it's it's good to kind of trade thoughts when you've had a very similar journey into tech as well. So it'd be nice to see where you go in the future and stuff. So we'll keep in touch.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Appreciate it. And if people want to get in touch with you to maybe ask your opinion on stuff and see what you're up to, what's the best way?
Just my name on LinkedIn. To be fair, I think that's probably the fastest way because you've always got it open, or through the Discord. In your Discord, I think I've got
Yeah,
my
you're a fairly active member in there, aren't you?
yeah. I think if you just drop me a message on either one of them, eventually I'll get round to replying, and we can if it's something that's needs more context. I don't mind jumping on a call and going through some stuff.
Cool. Sounds great. Well, thanks again for joining me, Josh, and thanks as well to the listeners for checking out another episode of the Code Career every other Monday on all good audio platforms, plus YouTube. You can find us. Don't forget to share as well, and do obviously jump in the Discord. Me and Josh both chatting on there quite a lot. I'm at Cam Blackwood on there. Josh, I think you're at Briz, I think, if I recall correctly. You can find
Yeah,
us
yeah,
both
yeah.
on the server. Cool, brilliant. Well, the links to that are in the description. And thanks again for tuning in. Have a great week, everyone.